In the summer of 2001, in a small town tucked between the gentle green hills of Vermont, there lived a girl named Emily Parker. She was only 6 years old, with a giggle that could light up the entire street and eyes that mirrored the morning sky. Emily's room was her kingdom, a bright space filled with stuffed animals, princess posters, and her most precious possession, a yellow recording toy shaped like a star. Every night before bed, Emily would sing into that toy, record silly messages for her mom, or leave imaginary orders for her stuffed animals. Her mother, Sarah, loved to listen to these recordings when she felt lonely in the evenings after Emily went to sleep. One warm June night, Sarah tucked Emily into bed as usual. Emily kissed her on the cheek, squeezed her toy, and whispered, "Good night, Mommy. I love you all the way to the moon." Sarah smiled, turned off the light, and closed the door behind her. But when she woke up the next morning, Emily was gone. The window was slightly ajar, the curtains dancing gently in the breeze. The toy lay on the floor, silent and lifeless. Panic consumed Sarah as she searched every corner of the house, calling her daughter's name with a voice that cracked and fell apart with each echo. The police arrived, neighbors joined the search, and volunteers combed the woods for days. News crews flocked to the small town, broadcasting images of Emily's smiling face across the nation. Her disappearance became a haunting mystery, leaving behind only a shattered mother and an empty pink room that felt like a museum of lost laughter. Sarah kept the room exactly as it was. She would sit on Emily's bed every night, holding the yellow star toy, replaying the old recordings to hear her daughter's sweet voice, hoping for some sign, some clue. Years passed. The house became quieter, heavier. Sarah stopped going out. Friends stopped visiting. The world seemed to move on, but Sarah was frozen in time, trapped in that single morning when everything she loved was stolen from her. Every anniversary of Emily's disappearance, Sarah lit a candle and sang the lullaby Emily loved most. She prayed, whispered promises into the dark, and held the toy against her heart. People pitied her. Some suggested therapy. Others advised her to let go. But Sarah clung to that little voice in the toy like it was a lifeline. 9 years later, in 2010, on a rainy evening that matched her grief, Sarah felt an urge she hadn't felt in years. She picked up the toy, wiped off the dust, and pressed play. But this time, she heard something different, something she had never noticed before, hidden deep beneath the cheerful messages. Her heart raced. She played it again, her fingers trembling, her tears falling onto the worn plastic. At first, Sarah thought her ears were playing tricks on her, but there it was, a faint voice, low and chilling, buried beneath Emily's giggles. She turned the volume all the way up and listened carefully. The window, the truck, shh. The words were barely audible, as if someone had whispered into the toy while Emily wasn't aware. Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the recording anymore. She played it over and over again, piecing together the fragments of sound. The window, the truck, hurry! The realization hit her like a flood. Someone had been in her house that night. Someone had whispered instructions or a plan into Emily's toy, unaware that it was recording. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she pressed her forehead against the wall, the pain of 9 long years crashing back all at once. For the first time in nearly a decade, she felt a surge of hope. Sarah called the police immediately. At first, they were skeptical. After all, so many years had passed and the case had long gone cold. But Sarah insisted. She demanded they listen to the recording. When a detective, Mark Reynolds, finally agreed to visit, he sat in Emily's dusty pink room, headphones on, eyes narrowing with each passing second. After a long pause, Mark removed the headphones and looked up at Sarah with a seriousness she hadn't seen since that terrible day. "Mrs. Parker," he said slowly, This could be something." Within hours, the recording was sent to audio experts who enhanced the sounds, revealing even clearer words. "Pick her up quietly. Window unlocked. Drive to the shed." The words sent chills through everyone listening. Investigators rushed to revisit old leads. The town buzzed with renewed attention. Sarah, though terrified, felt a flicker of light inside her heart. Every day she sat by the phone waiting for updates, praying for a miracle she had almost given up on. Each night, she held the yellow toy to her chest and whispered to Emily, telling her to hold on, to stay strong. She imagined Emily somewhere out there, maybe still alive, maybe waiting to be found. The investigation pointed to an old maintenance worker who had access to nearby houses during that time. His property, long ignored, was searched again. Deep in the woods behind his barn, they discovered a small underground room. Inside, they found old toys, a child's drawings, and evidence that someone had lived there. It felt like a nightmare and a miracle combined. When they finally uncovered a hidden door leading to a separate sealed-off space, Sarah felt her breath stop completely. What lay beyond that door would either destroy her forever or finally bring her back to life. The officers forced open the hidden door. The rusty hinges screeched, echoing through the dense woods, as if announcing the release of long-buried secrets. Inside, the air was stale and thick. A single dim lamp hung from the ceiling, its flickering light revealing a small bed, a stack of books, and faded posters of cartoon characters peeling off the walls. In the corner, curled up like a frightened animal, was a young woman with long, tangled hair and wide, haunted eyes. She looked up, startled, clutching an old stuffed bear as if it were her last connection to a lost world. "Emily," one of the officers whispered, barely believing it himself. The girl flinched at the name but didn't speak. Her eyes darted from one face to another, searching for safety in the chaos. It had been 9 years since she had heard her own name spoken with love. Sarah arrived moments later, breathless, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. When she stepped into the room and saw her daughter, her knees gave out beneath her. She crawled forward, tears blurring her vision, and reached out with trembling hands. "Emily, it's me. It's Mommy," she choked out. The young woman's eyes softened as she stared at Sarah. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and touched her mother's face, as if to confirm she wasn't a dream. In that instant, the years of fear, pain, and loneliness melted into a single cry. Emily fell into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. They held each other like two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together again. Outside, officers exchanged glances, some wiping tears from their eyes. The moment was raw, pure, and heavy with the weight of all they had both lost and finally regained. Emily was taken to the hospital, and though she was physically fragile, she was alive. A miracle Sarah had never dared to truly believe she would see. Reporters flocked to the scene, but Sarah refused to let them near. For her, this was not a story to sell, but a sacred moment to protect. Sarah transformed their home into a sanctuary. She repainted Emily's room, filled it with sunlight and soft blankets, and covered the walls with new pictures, symbols of a future waiting to be rebuilt. Each day, Sarah would sit beside her daughter, brushing her hair, reading to her, and patiently helping her rediscover her voice. It was a slow journey. But with every whispered, "I love you," Emily grew stronger. With every gentle touch, her eyes lit up a little more. Together, they began to stitch the torn fabric of their lives, one fragile but determined thread at a time. Weeks turned into months, and Emily slowly adjusted to the world she had been kept away from for so long. At first, she was afraid of every sudden noise, every unexpected visitor. She would hide behind Sarah whenever someone knocked on the door. But Sarah's unwavering patience became the anchor Emily needed. Sarah enrolled Emily in therapy, and the sessions were both painful and healing. Emily began to draw her feelings, sketches of dark woods, locked doors, and then, over time, pictures of her mother holding her hand, standing in the sun. Each drawing was like a page in a new story, one that Emily was finally free to write. Sarah never left her side. They went on long walks in the park where Emily cautiously learned to trust the open sky again. She found joy in small things, the sound of birds, the smell of fresh flowers, the way the wind moved her hair. People in town, once strangers, began to recognize Emily. They offered gentle smiles and encouraging words, careful not to overwhelm her. One afternoon, as Emily and Sarah sat on a bench, Emily turned and whispered, "Mom, did you really always look for me?" Her voice trembled with the weight of years of doubt. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Every single day," she replied, holding Emily's hand tightly. "I never stopped. I never gave up on you." A fragile smile appeared on Emily's face, her first true smile since coming home. In that moment, Sarah knew that the girl she had lost in 2001 was finally starting to come back, piece by piece. "Your courage gives me strength." Emily hugged her, feeling a deep sense of purpose awaken inside. Months turned into a year. Emily was no longer the terrified child hiding behind closed doors. She was becoming an advocate for healing, a living testament to the power of love. Her bond with Sarah deepened beyond words, a bond forged through loss, pain, and ultimately, an unbreakable devotion. One clear evening, Sarah and Emily sat by the window, watching the stars. Emily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for bringing me back to life." Sarah squeezed her hand and softly replied, "You brought yourself back, my brave girl. I just never let go of your hand." They sat in peaceful silence, the night sky above them a silent witness to their journey. In that moment, they knew they were not just survivors. They were warriors of love and hope. Together, they turned a story of unimaginable loss into one of healing and redemption, proving to the world that even in the darkest times, the human spirit has the power to find light again. As more time passed, Emily's story spread beyond their small town. Journalists who once sensationalized her disappearance now shared her story as one of resilience and hope. A famous talk show invited her to speak, but Emily politely declined, choosing to protect her peace and heal at her own pace. Instead, she found her voice in quieter ways. She began writing letters to other survivors, pouring her heart into words that reached far beyond what cameras could capture. With each letter, she felt a piece of her old fear melt away. Emily also discovered a passion for music. One day, she sat at a dusty piano in the community center and started playing simple chords. Music became her new language, a way to express emotions too deep for words. Soon, she began performing small pieces during local gatherings. When she played, people didn't see the broken child from years ago. They saw a young woman who had transformed pain into art. Sarah watched proudly from the sidelines. She saw Emily blossom from a frightened, silent girl into someone whose spirit lit up rooms. Their relationship deepened beyond mother and daughter. They became each other's greatest champions. During one emotional evening performance, Emily paused before her final song and addressed the audience. "When I was gone, my mother never stopped believing. She taught me that even if the world gives up on you, love will not. This song is for her, and for everyone who fights their silent battles." The crowd was moved to tears. After the show, people lined up to hug her, whispering how her courage inspired them to forgive, to heal, or to reconnect with loved ones. Back at home, Sarah kept every thank you note Emily received. They decorated a special wall of hope in their kitchen, a mosaic of letters and drawings from strangers whose lives had been touched. It served as a daily reminder of how deeply Emily's story resonated beyond their own pain. Emily continued to explore new dreams. She took classes in psychology, wanting to understand trauma more deeply, and hoped to help others one day. Though she never wanted to forget her past, she refused to let it define her future. On the 9th anniversary of her return, Sarah and Emily held a small candlelit ceremony in their backyard. Close friends and neighbors gathered as Emily spoke softly but confidently. "We can't erase the scars, but we can choose what they mean. Mine remind me that I am alive, that I am loved, and that no one can take my spirit away again." As the candles flickered under the stars, the warmth of the moment wrapped around them like an embrace. It wasn't just a commemoration of survival. It was a celebration of transformation and the quiet, steadfast power of love. That night, as they stood together, Emily realized that the girl who once vanished in the dark had become a beacon of light for countless others. And in that shimmering glow, mother and daughter knew they had finally come home. Months turned into years, and Emily's presence continued to ripple throughout the community. Though she had chosen not to appear on national television, word of her story reached organizations and foundations focused on supporting missing and exploited children. They approached her to speak at closed events, and after some hesitation she agreed, not to relive her pain, but to give hope to families still waiting for their loved ones. At her first event, she stood behind the podium, her hands trembling slightly. She looked out at the sea of tearful parents, siblings, and survivors. Then she took a deep breath and spoke. "I once thought I was beyond saving. I thought the world had forgotten me. But someone never did. My mother, and eventually, this entire town. We all deserve to be seen, to be believed, to be loved back to life." A hush fell over the room, followed by thunderous applause. Many in the audience felt an invisible weight lift off their shoulders, just hearing someone speak so honestly about the wounds they carried. Afterward, parents lined up to thank her, some holding pictures of missing children, hoping for a miracle. Emily offered each of them a gentle smile and words of strength. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a symbol of unwavering hope. Meanwhile, Sarah watched with awe and quiet gratitude. She remembered all the lonely nights she spent replaying that last conversation with her daughter, the guilt of not being able to protect her, and the countless days of wondering if she'd ever see Emily again. Now she saw her daughter standing tall, stronger than anyone could imagine. Emily's musical performances also continued, growing in both depth and purpose. She began composing original songs inspired by the stories she heard at the support groups and meetings. Each melody carried the echoes of pain, but also the notes of healing and freedom. At a small outdoor concert one spring evening, Emily performed a new song titled "Echoes of the Heart." It was dedicated to all those who had vanished and to those still waiting for them. By the end, the audience was standing, many with tears streaming down their faces. Among them was a young girl who came forward and whispered, "I didn't think anyone would understand my story, but tonight I felt seen." That moment reaffirmed Emily's mission. She realized that the power of sharing, of speaking, and of listening could rebuild souls long thought lost. As Sarah hugged her daughter backstage, she whispered, "You are changing the world in ways I never imagined." Emily smiled back, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I think the world is just catching up to the love you always believed I deserved." Their bond, forged through unimaginable hardship, was now unbreakable. They had moved from tragedy to triumph, and from survival to purpose. And through each performance, each speech, and each tender connection, Emily was transforming silent suffering into a chorus of hope that would echo far beyond their little town. Months after her first public speech, Emily was invited to perform at a national conference for child safety and advocacy. The event was attended by lawmakers, educators, social workers, and families from all over the country. The weight of the invitation terrified Emily at first. Standing in front of so many powerful people, sharing her most fragile truths. But she knew deep inside that she had a responsibility bigger than her own fear. Sarah accompanied her to the event, holding her hand tightly backstage. Before going on, Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought of her years in captivity, of the long nights she had felt invisible, and of the little red toy that had somehow bridged the impossible distance back to her mother. She carried those memories like armor. When she finally stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the audience. Emily began her speech, not with words, but with a soft, haunting melody on her guitar. Then she looked up, her voice calm but powerful. "I spent years trapped in darkness," she said, her voice echoing in the silent hall. "But it wasn't just the chains or the walls that held me. It was the belief that no one was coming, that I wasn't worth saving. It took a single voice, a single act of love, to shatter that lie." She described her mother's unwavering faith, the night she heard her old toy, and the feeling of finally stepping into the moonlight after 9 long years. As she spoke, people wiped away tears, some clasping each other's hands, others hugging loved ones beside them. Halfway through, she paused and scanned the audience. "Many of you are here because you love someone who is still missing. I can't promise you the ending you're hoping for, but I can promise you this. Love does not disappear. It does not stop echoing. Keep calling their names. Keep believing in them. You might be the voice that leads them home." The applause was deafening. Afterward, a line of people waited to meet her. Parents, social workers, young survivors, even officers who had once searched for missing children and thought they had failed. Each thanked her for giving them hope, for proving that miracles are not only possible, but often found in the quietest acts of faith. Sarah watched it all, tears of pride streaming down her face. She had spent nearly a decade praying, questioning, and refusing to give up. And now she saw her daughter transform those scars into a force of healing for others. That evening, back in their hotel room, Emily and Sarah sat on the bed holding hands, a soft glow from the bedside lamp washing over them. Emily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I thought I lost everything," she whispered. "But I see now that love was always my strongest weapon." Sarah kissed her forehead, her heart finally at peace. "And it always will be," she replied. Together, they looked out the window at the city lights below, a quiet, shining reminder that even the deepest darkness can't snuff out a single determined flame. After the conference, Emily's story spread across the nation. News outlets ran features on her journey, calling her the girl who came back from the shadows. Schools invited her to speak. Nonprofit organizations asked her to join awareness campaigns, and her story inspired thousands to keep searching for missing loved ones. Despite all the attention, Emily remained humble. She kept telling people she wasn't a hero, but simply a girl who had refused to be forgotten. Her humility only deepened people's respect for her. Through every interview and event, she reminded them of the importance of small, everyday acts of love. A mother's song, a stuffed toy, a whispered prayer in the night. Emily and Sarah soon moved into a cozy new house in a quiet neighborhood, trying to build a semblance of normalcy. Emily decorated her room with bright colors, plants, and pieces of art she painted herself, each brushstroke a silent testament to her healing. Late at night, when the world felt too heavy, Emily would sit by her window, listening to the soft wind. Sometimes she still felt echoes of the dark basement, the chains rattling, the whispered threats. But then she would turn her head and see Sarah asleep nearby, or hear the faint sound of music playing from her old toy on the shelf. Those reminders grounded her in the present, reminding her she was safe now, she was loved, and she had the power to shape her future. One day, Emily received a letter from a young girl who had been rescued from trafficking after hearing Emily's speech. The letter was scrawled in shaky handwriting. "I thought I was invisible, but when I heard you, I knew someone cared. Thank you for saving me." Emily held the letter against her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. She realized that her pain had become a bridge for others, a lifeline for those still drowning. The past, once an endless source of grief, had transformed into a tool for compassion and courage. Sarah, watching her daughter grow stronger every day, felt a bittersweet gratitude. She knew they could never erase the horrors, but she also saw that Emily's scars had become the foundation of her strength. Every tremor in her voice, every nervous glance, they were pieces of a warrior in progress. Together they started a foundation, in Emily's name, focused on supporting families of missing children and providing therapy for survivors. They held community events, created art therapy programs, and trained volunteers to become better listeners and advocates. In the quiet moments, Sarah would sometimes place her hand on Emily's back, feeling her breathe deeply and steadily. Each breath was a victory, each heartbeat a silent hymn of survival. Emily often said, "Pain made me feel small, but love made me infinite." And as she stood before countless audiences, or sat comforting survivors in private, that simple truth resonated more powerfully than any headline or applause ever could. 9 years of pain had shaped Margaret into a woman who no longer expected miracles. But that night, as she watched Lily fall asleep, she felt something new, an urge to live again, not just survive. Lily had grown into a girl filled with fierce spirit, her laughter echoing through the house like sunlight finally piercing a storm. Margaret often sat in her garden now, talking to Lily about the stars, about hope, and about all the stories they would create together from now on. Neighbors who had once avoided Margaret began visiting, drawn by the joy returning to her home. Lily would run to them with open arms, offering flowers, drawings, and her sweet, shy smiles. Slowly, a community that had once judged and whispered started to heal too. Margaret realized that her pain had blinded her to the beauty of small moments, the warmth of a child's hand, the comfort of a shared cup of tea, the freedom to breathe deeply without fear. Lily, who had survived horrors no child should endure, began to share pieces of her story. Margaret listened without forcing, creating a space safe enough for Lily to reclaim her voice at her own pace. Some days were hard. Flashbacks, nightmares, sudden flinches at unexpected noises, but they faced them together. Margaret learned to be patient, to anchor Lily when storms rolled in, to teach her how to find calm in the chaos. They planted a new garden together that summer. Lily named each flower after a feeling: courage, hope, forgiveness, rebirth. The once empty yard now bloomed with color, becoming a living tribute to resilience. In the evenings they would sit on the porch swing, the same place where Margaret once listened to her daughter's toy in the dark. Now, instead of recorded laughter, she had the real sound of Lily's giggles beside her. Margaret understood that healing wasn't about erasing scars, but learning to live beautifully alongside them. When fall arrived, Margaret decided to share their story publicly. She wanted to help other families believe in possibilities beyond despair. News outlets picked up the story, and letters poured in from all over the country, messages of hope, apologies from strangers who had judged too harshly, and stories from other parents who had lost children and found solace in Margaret's journey. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in pink and gold, Lily handed Margaret a drawing. It showed two figures, one tall, one small, standing in a field of colorful flowers, holding hands under a bright, smiling sun. Underneath, Lily had written in her careful, wobbly handwriting, "Thank you for waiting for me, Mommy." Margaret felt her heart expand beyond words. In that moment, she understood that this was not just her second chance at motherhood. It was a second chance at life itself. Together, they had turned a tragedy into a testament of love's unstoppable power.